We are right now in the middle of our 3 weeks in hell. We had lab exam 3 last week. Thursday is lecture exam 3. Next week is lab exam 4. So that's what the housekeeping stuff. Depending how Thursday lab treats me on Thursday, I might actually post lecture exam 3 scores before I leave here on Thursday. Just kind of depends on how tired I am. At the latest, exam scores will be posted by noon on Friday. And this is kind of key for some of you, as Friday is the last drop deadline. That's what it's all on information on the slide. If you are still registered in the class after the close of business on Friday, you will get a final grade. If you drop before the close of business on Friday, then you'll have a W. It's the last day to have a W. If you're registered at the close of business, you will get a final grade. So depending on how things go, I'm hoping to either post them before I leave on Thursday. Yeah, then you will meet Drew.
Yeah.
But if not, it'll be by noon on Friday. And my band has had a 6-week hiatus because our singer had some surgery. But it looks like we will be playing at Harry's at Pisco, the afternoon gig.
Oh,
Which
that's
is
fun.
nice because things can get kind of, we've headlined at Harry's and things can get kind of ugly. I don't want to talk about it. But that'll be after your 3 weeks in hell, so that'll be a good time to kind of produce. All right. We're continuing on with lecture exam 4 material. We finished talking about the circulatory system, and right with the circulatory system, we need to talk about the lymphatic system because it parallels the circulatory system. There's some pictures of the lymphatic system. Those lymphatic vessels parallel some arteries and veins. In fact, in the body, when we dissect out various structures, and when I was at UCLA, we worked on cadavers. We didn't work on organ systems. We worked on regions, and when we were in a region, we did everything. We did the muscles, we did the nerves, we did the blood vessels. So it was a little bit more comprehensive. But we would find these little highways in the body. And in these areas, these little seams of loose connective tissue, you would see these 4 things running like lanes of a highway. There would be an artery, a vein, a nerve, and a lymphatic vessel. Just all right together. You just see this all throughout the body. So let's talk about some structures. First, we have lymphatic capillaries, which I have there. Go ahead and fill in the blanks and let me kind of set this up so you can understand what the lymphatic system is doing. All blood capillaries, this is the regular circulatory system capillaries, leak. Probably the ones that leak the least are the ones in the CNS. Why do the capillaries in the CNS leak the least? The blood-brain barrier. Okay, it still leaks, but a lot less. All other capillaries leak more. And when it leaks, when fluids leak out of blood capillaries, that fluid is called interstitial fluid, which just means it's in between cells. It's in your body, it's outside the cells, in between them. Interstitial means in between. Everybody got it? Well, this fluid needs to get picked up, otherwise it accumulates out in all your tissues. We'll talk about that later. And so round blood capillaries, and this is the picture on the right, around blood capillaries you will see these blind and lymphatic capillaries. And there are no tunics, there's only one layer. So there's not multiple layers like in blood vessels, just one layer. And it's endothelial cells. these endothelial cells are acting as one-way valves, and that's what this animation on the bottom is showing. And it's picking up this interstitial fluid. And it's interstitial fluid outside here, but once it gets past the endothelial cells, it's now called lymph. So interstitial fluid outside the lymphatic capillary, once it's in, the fluid is called lymph. It's exactly the same as interstitial fluid in content. It's just the name changes from interstitial fluid to lymph. And because all the lymphatic vessels have one-way valves, the lymphatic flow is one way. Here's the valve right here. Okay? Everybody understand 1 and 2 and what I'm doing on the whiteboard?
Yes.
Okay. Now lacteals, we will see in lab this week. They are the specific blind end capillary in what is called an intestinal villus, in the small intestine. So here you got blood capillaries going from an arterial to a venule in between our blood capillaries. See how it goes from red to blue?
Okay.
But that is just a specific lymphatic capillary in an intestinal villus. All lacteals are lymphatic capillaries, not all lymphatic capillaries are lacteals. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay? Did everybody get that?
Can you say it again?
All lacteals are lymphatic capillaries. But because they're the specific lymphatic capillaries in an intestinal villus, not all lymphatic capillaries are lacteals. All lacteals are lymphatic capillaries, not all lymphatic capillaries are lacteals. Lacteals are the specific lymphatic capillary in an intestinal villus. When you absorb a meal, almost all the nutrients are going into the blood capillary, not the fat. The fat's going in the lacteal. Okay? Let me bring that up later. All the things that you absorb are gonna go into blood capillaries except the fats. It's going into the lymphatic instead, not the blood. That's what this is saying.
Why is that? Can it just not be broken down, or?
It is the affinity that the lymph in the lymphatic capillary has for fats. All right? So here it goes right here. Instead of the blood capillary, it's gonna go this way in green. Everybody got it? All the other nutrients are gonna go through the hepatic portal vein into the liver. So not everything actually gets filtered in the liver. Fats do not.
So is the lymph fluid like primarily fat?
Well, the lymph is coming from lacteals. Not primarily, but it's much heavier in fat than other lymph.
So it's not just that.
Right. Now, various lymphatic capillaries are now going to collect in larger lymphatic vessels called collecting vessels. These are highly variable, so they're not even named. It not only varies from person to person, collecting vessels on your right arm are different from your left arm. That's why we don't name them. Everybody got it? We just call them collecting vessels. Again, they gotta have valves to ensure that the lymph flows in one direction. And here you can see this running parallel to an artery and a vein. Here's what some of those little highways look like, and oftentimes you'll see a nerve trunk right here too. You'll see 4 things. Everybody got it? What the picture is on the bottom right? And then again, here's a picture of a valve, just loaded with valves to ensure the flow is one way. Okay? Again, they tend to run in loose connective tissue. And when they're running deep, they're paralleling a deep vein with an artery. Various collecting vessels will collect into larger lymphatic vessels called lymphatic trunks. Now, there is still some variation with this, but it has enough consistency where we will actually name these. Intestinal trunk, lumbar trunks, subclavian trunks, axillary trunks. We'll actually name them. All the body's lymphatic trunks, we're going to end up in either one of two lymphatic ducts. They are not equal, but this is a little bit different from our role for lab exam 4 with arteries and veins. The one on the right, which actually only drains the upper right quadrant of the body, is going to dump into the right lymphatic duct, and that dumps into the right subclavian vein. The lymphatic system is in black. This is now venous blood. So where this is interstitial fluid, all these red arrows, it's lymph. Once it's in the subclavian vein, it is now venous blood. Since these are not symmetrical, we don't call the left one the left lymphatic duct because it's collecting lymph from the rest of the body. 3/4. So we call the left side the thoracic duct. And that's going to dump into the left subclavian vein. And that also is no longer lymph, it is venous blood. Okay. See there, the area in red is where it's going into the right lymphatic duct, and the rest is going into the thoracic duct. But each are going symmetrically in the right and left subclavian veins. This one's only getting 1/4, this is getting 3/4. Everybody following this slide?
Why isn't the left subclavian vein a little bit larger than it's getting so much more lymphatic?
It is because of all the lacteals going into the intestinal trunk. It is asymmetrical how it developed, but everything from the guts are going into the thoracic duct and not splitting evenly. And so because of that, all the things from the legs, both legs, will also go into that thoracic duct. Does this help?
Yeah.
Any questions? So basically, lymph, this is kind of like cerebral spinal fluid tracing. Lymph came from blood and returns to blood. Everybody see that? Lymph came from blood and returns to blood. Again, there's no hydrostatic pressure to speak of. The only reason why lymph moves in one direction is because of all the valves. It's a one-way flow, not only through the lymphatic vessels, but even through the lymphatic organs that are filtering lymph, like lymph nodes. One way, or it can have multiple ways in, but it's always in for these four up on top, and one way out. Even through lymphatic organs, it's a one-way flow. And there's only two normal destinations, and they're down here in blue. And this is why this parallels the circulatory system. If you don't collect this constant leakage of interstitial fluid, the interstitial fluid builds up in the tissue. We call that lymphedema. Have you guys seen pictures in the wilds of people with elephantiasis and other things where their limbs get huge? It's because the parasites go live in lymphatic vessels and block them. What you're seeing is intense lymphedema.
How do you cure from that?
You
Just
gotta,
antibiotics
you
or-
have to unblock the lymphatic vessels. Because this is not even like a blister or even an abscess or a cellulitis where you just have fluid. It's fluid in a mix with cells. You can't just cut into it and expect to get all this interstitial fluid. You'll get some out, but it's not the same. You have to unblock lymphatic vessels. All right, let's talk about lymphoid organs. Organs means it has a fibrous capsule. Basically, it's bordered by collagen. The most numerous of lymphoid organs or lymphatic organs are lymph nodes. They are scattered throughout your body, but they are places in your body where you just have more of them, aggregations. And so we will call certain lymph nodes if they are a part of those, but they are scattered throughout your body. So there's some in your neck, cervical, armpits, axillary, popliteal, inguinal, on and on and on and on. For example, the function of this is to try to limit the spread of infection. If you have an infection, the lymph nodes are trying to keep it in that area so it doesn't go whole body. Whole body, that's referred to as a systemic infection. He's trying to keep it in the area. Not just infectious organisms, but cancer. It's trying to keep the cancer located right in that one spot. So even though it can spread in lymph nodes, it's trying to keep it from getting to the blood. Because once it gets to the blood, you can have metastatic tumors all throughout your body. Does this make sense? But say, question?
What's metastatic, what'd you say?
Metastatic is where the cancer split off. Remember when we talked about all those structures that help cells stick together, like desmosomes, and those genes go in a lot of cancers, and when they go, you don't have those structures anymore, cells can break off, go downstream, cause another tumor. That's metastasis. So say for instance, if you have a lung cancer, these guys right here, thoracic lymph nodes, are trying to keep it in the lungs. If it spreads from the lungs, the next place is probably gonna go is in your armpits, then it'll be in the axillary. And that's how they stage cancers, by the way, is if they stage it, if it spreads into your lymphatic system, it's stage 3 cancer. If the lymphatic system can't keep it from going into the blood and it goes into your blood, it's stage 4. Everybody got that? All right, so lymph nodes. There are extensions of the fibrous capsule that go into the lymph node and divide it into sections. Those are called trabeculae. And here we go again with cortex and medulla. We see it throughout so many other organs. We see it in lymph nodes. Outer region is the cortical region. Inner region is the medullary region. Now remember when we were talking about blood, and you guys remember new legs move even better? Neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophil, basophil. That's the relative order, correct? And then I said this, lymphocytes are number 2 in blood. But read the slide. You have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lymph nodes in your body, and they're chock full of lymphocytes. B lymphocytes are a specific type of lymphocytes. T lymphocytes are also lymphocytes. When you say B cells and T cells, those are lymphocytes. These are not counted in new legs move even better, because this is not in blood. This is why lymphocytes are number 1 whole body, number 2 in blood. Lymphocytes are number 1 whole body because these aren't counted in blood. It's only number 2 in blood. When you are fighting off an infection, you get a lot of these cells cloning. The whole lymph node is full of lymphocytes. If they're all cloning, the whole thing is expanding against this fibrous capsule, and it's actually kind of tender to touch. Everybody got it? If you have a swollen lymph node and it's not tender to touch, that is bad news. Because that is one of the signs of stage 3 cancer. Cancerous lymph nodes are not sore. Only the ones fighting off infections are sore. Everybody got it? Medical term is induration. All right, any questions on this? No, this is this is a cartoon, this is the real thing. Just, again, like I said, a lot of stuff in lecture exam 3, concentrate on things that are highlighted, underlined, or bolded. I'm not putting it all on the whiteboard. Okay? Now what? What's that?
You mean like your exam 4?
Yeah, lecture exam 4. Because there's a lot of material on lecture exam 4. Now, while you have hundreds and hundreds, probably actually thousands in your body, you only have one spleen. And we saw last week in lab the splenic artery and the splenic vein, okay? Any organ that has a concave portion, whether it is the medial surface of the lungs, or the medial surface of the kidneys, or on this one surface of the spleen where it's concave, we call that a hilus or hilum. And that's where the splenic artery and veins enter and leave. We have a gastrosplenic ligament, which is a form of mesentery, which is visceral peritoneum. That's actually not on the organ. Okay, you have to remember that when we talked about visceral parietal, I said imagine a kind of a flat balloon and shoving your fist in it, and that fist is an organ growing into the cavity.
Yes.
When you have certain organs growing into the cavity, you'll take in with that organ peritoneum. It's no longer on the cavity wall, it's not parietal, so it's visceral. The only thing is that as the fist went in, Only the fist is the organ. The rubber only on the fist we call visceral peritoneum. But then there's rubber on my wrist. Are you following me? It's not on the fist, it's on the wrist. That's mesentery. Yeah, your look on your face says that I just spoke Greek.
The outside portion of your wrist?
Remember the balloon, shoving your fist in it. Now there's 2 layers of rubber, correct?
Yes.
There's the rubber that's not touching my skin at all. That's parietal peritoneum. The only difference is the organ is only my fist. The rubber touching my fist is visceral peritoneum. In reality, all of the rubber touching my skin is visceral peritoneum, but we only call it on the fist visceral peritoneum. What's on the wrist would be mesentery. The specific visceral peritoneum that's not on the organ. That's not on the fist.
Is mesentery on there?
No,
Okay.
you'll see it later. Well, actually, we did see it all the way back when. So when all these organs are growing into the cavity, what's lining the cavity is parietal peritoneum. What's lining the organ is visceral peritoneum, but you will have these little spots that are on either. This is still visceral peritoneum. Gastrosplenic ligament is specific mesentery that's connecting the spleen to the stomach. Gastrosplenic. It's still visceral peritoneum. It's just on neither the stomach or the spleen. It's mesentery.
So it's still, how do you have it still visceral peritoneum but mesentery?
It's called.
Because it's not on the cavity wall. It's not on the organ, but you can see in the figure how it got drawn in as the organ grew into the cavity. The vast majority of mesentery is on the small intestine, because for the small intestine, that fist is 20 feet long. There's going to be a lot of mesentery if a fist is 20 feet long. Are you catching what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's still visceral because it's not bordering the cavity wall, but it's not actually on the 20-foot fist. It got drawn in as that fist grew to 20 feet. Now you got all this extra visceral peritoneum, what do you call it? Mesentery. Gastrosplenic ligament is specific mesentery because of how these organs grew in. Okay, let's not get hung up on that. Concentrate on the spleen.
Is connecting spleen and the stomach, you said?
Yes. Here's the spleen, here's the stomach, and hence the name gastro for stomach, splenic ligament. Can we move on? All right, and also what you notice when you actually open up a cadaver, especially when you open up the chest plate, the organs are so tightly packed. There's no empty space. There's no air bubbles inside your guts, inside the cavity. There's no air bubbles. Everything is just completely packed in there. So adjacent organs actually put dents into the next organ. That's why they call it the stomach area. The stomach puts a dent in here. The kidneys put this dent in here. Large intestines put this dent in here. Just because things are so packed. They had to draw this thing right here. In reality, white is touching white. It is packed. There's no empty spaces inside your body. Everybody got it? All right. Internal structures. Red pulp is red blood cells. By the way, at any one point in time, the spleen holds a pint of blood. There's a lot of blood in your spleen. White pulp is, again, lymphocytes. Lymphocytes that are not included in New Lake's Move Even Better. Lymphocytes are #1 whole body. Okay. Go ahead and fill up those. We mentioned the spleen and the second diamond there is it's one of the organs with macrophages that takes out 120-day-old red blood cells when they get old. Macrophages in the liver, bone marrow, and spleen. Because it's taking out old red blood cells, it's helping to recycle iron. It's gonna eventually put the iron in the blood, it's gonna go into red bone marrow, it's gonna go into other red blood cells. The recycling is not 100%. It's a vast majority, it's not 100%, which is why you need to eat iron every day. Now the first diamond is what I wanna focus on. It does for blood what the lymph nodes do for lymph. This is why you have to have thousands of lymph nodes, as they're spread out throughout the whole body. Say for instance, you tripped and fell, you skinned your knee. You're gonna get bacteria inside your body where it don't belong. It could get in a couple different places in your knee. It could either get in a blood vessel, or it can get in between the cells, in interstitial fluid. Everybody got it? Doesn't belong, it got in. If it goes into interstitial fluid, guess what? Lymph node's gonna get it, because before it goes through this whole thing, it's gonna go through several lymph nodes. Got it? If it gets in the blood, you only have one, and that's a spleen. Those that have to get their spleen removed have to be really careful about blood infections, because they no longer have this function. Any questions?
So the spleen is getting rid of it though through phagocytosis, but the lymph is just circulating it out?
The lymph nodes have the same thing.
Oh.
But this is why the spleen is the largest lymphoid organ, by far. Lymph nodes, a typical lymph node would be about this big. Be a dot on this. But that's because they're spread out by the hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands throughout your body. You only have one spleen, that's why it's gotta be big. Does this make sense? Okay, everybody got this? Thymus. All these have fibrous capsules. These are all lymphatic organs. Organs have a fibrous capsule. Cortex and medulla. Have you guys seen that enough? Thymus is in your materials, your course materials, in two different organ systems. In this, and in the endocrine system. Even though I didn't ask it in lab because I don't have any models of thymus. It actually secretes a hormone. Let's read up there in the first words. It's biggest relative to body size during the first year of life. That's because the rest of the body's so small. But it does continue to grow. It's just that the rest of the body grows faster. By the time you're a teenager, the thymus is at its biggest size, but you are already almost adult size. Everybody got it?
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody understand the difference between relative to body size and absolute size? Okay? I just explained it in words.
Okay, I was listening, sorry.
Okay.
I think I know what you're saying, though, I see the pictures, I get it.
Okay. And then after puberty, it starts shrinking. And for the rest of your adult life, it continues to shrink. That shrinkage is called involution. When we get our cadavers and they're all old, it's very difficult to find the thymus. because of involution.
Why does it do that? Why does it shrink? So the work it's doing, or?
The reason why is because this thymosin is about getting cell-mediated immunity going. And cell-mediated immunity is dependent on T lymphocytes. It differentiates lymphocytes into specific lymphocytes. We call it T lymphocytes. In fact, the T is named for the thymus.
You mean it's only in the thymus, the T ones are only in the thymus?
No,
Oh, just
but
the-
they become T lymphocytes because of this hormone thymosin that comes from the thymus, so they named it T lymphocytes. Didn't happen in the thymus caused them to become functional differentiated T lymphocytes. Everybody got that? Everybody understand what that means?
So T lymphocytes make it small, I don't understand that. Cell mediated, you say?
I'll talk about cell-mediated immunity at the end.
Oh, how am I supposed to understand
But
it?
just don't worry about it, just remember T lymphocytes. We've already talked about being T lymphocytes, right?
Okay. You're confusing. Alright, I'll be quiet. Don't ask me if I know what you're saying, if you said don't worry about it, then we'll talk about it later.
Here, right here.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
T cells,
T cells are T lymphocytes.
okay.
Okay. Now, here's the thing, once you got the cell-mediated immunity going, you really don't need thymosin anymore, which is why it shrinks throughout adulthood. Yes?
What's septa?
Septa are, like the trabeculae in the lymph nodes. It's little fibrous extensions that separate the, spleen and the thymus into functional regions. Okay. All right, so people in their first year of life have immature, undifferentiated immune systems. Because of involution, it's difficult for really old people to mount an immune response to new bugs. So if there is a year that there is a shortage of vaccines, who do they reserve the vaccines for?
People and babies.
Newborns, really young, well, not newborns, but infants and old people. Does this now make sense with the words that are on the slide?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, outer cortex. This is where the lymphoid stem cells can divide into T lymphocytes. In the medulla, this is where the endocrine portion of it is happening. The thymic corpuscles are secreting thymic hormones, which is thymosin. I'm gonna give you a little preview of next year, or next class. And that is giving you functional T cells. Yeah, there it is, cell-mediated immunity. Function, maturation of T cells and cell-mediated immunity. We'll talk about that more at the end. But T cells get the T from the thymus.
Is there a certain age it happens, or does it vary from people?
It's bell-shaped curve. It's like when teeth are up. Usually when teeth are up is a bell-shaped curve. I misspelled this.
That's a half point.
No, I corrected it before I turned it in. Everybody got this?
No, no, no. Okay.
Lymphoid tissue or nodules are not lymphoid organs because they lack fibrous capsule. So lymphoid or lymphatic tissue or nodules lack a fibrous capsule. They actually line all the tubes that are open to the outside world. And the reason why they line the tubes that are open to the outside world is because your skin is covered with microbes. Just wait till you take microbiology to find out. Now, this is why you gotta have some hygiene. Because these microbes like growing on sweat, sebum, and other skin oils. And over the course of the day, the count skyrockets, which is why you gotta wash them off periodically. While all those bugs that are on your skin near holes are trying to grow into the holes. That's why you have to have all your tubes open to the outside world, have these. Sometimes it's referred to as molt. Mucosa associated lymphatic or lymphoid tissue because it doesn't have a fibrous capsule. Molt lines all your tubes. The only one I have highlighted up there is that digestive tract because later we will see molt in the digestive tract. But the respiratory tract and the urinary tract and all your reproductive tracts also have it. All tubes open to the outside world is loaded with molt. Tonsils, the 5 of them, are just the first molt of digestive and respiratory tubes. They're nothing special. They're just molt. They're just the first ones. And that's the first ones that are kind of big. But don't think it ends there. Go all throughout the tube, you see molt.
So we actually have 5 tonsils?
Uh-huh. And they're up there, 2 on 2.
Wow.
Everybody see that?
Yeah. That's
The
weird.
one that you might look in the bathroom mirror and go, ah, to see, those would be the palatine tonsils.
is
And
that
that's why you
when-
might think you only have 2.
When people say they're getting their tonsils removed?
Right,
that's
it could be
what
any of them, but that's a more common one, because it can interfere with swallowing as well as breathing, if they get too swollen. The pharyngeal tonsils is 1, and that's in the superior posterior roof of the nasal pharynx. If it gets inflamed, we will sometimes use the word adenoid. Adenoid is something that we use when that 1 gets inflamed. And then on the base of the tongue, there are 2 more lingual tonsils. So you have 5, yes?
So when you get strep throat, would that be the palatine tonsils or?
They can be any of them. They are most commonly the pelican tonsils. All right, back when I was a kid, a long, long time ago, they used to shuck these guys out left and right. And you know, every kid wanted their tonsils out because they got a week of eating nothing but ice cream. So I just loved it. The only thing is what is the function of these lymphatic organs and lymphatic tissues? It's to fight off infection. So when you just arbitrarily shuck out tonsils, what do you think that's gonna do to your natural defenses? So now, they only do it when they have to, and one of the most common reasons why you have to is because of a chronic strep infection that the tonsil cannot remove. And now the tonsil itself has a chronic infection. And then it gets swollen, and it gets swollen, and if you look at that picture there on the right, if it gets too swollen, you can't swallow, you can't breathe. Then you have to take them out, and instead now what they try to do if they can get away with it is partial tonsillectomies, where they don't completely take it out, they just take it out and open up your airway and swallow it. Because they don't want to take out your natural defenses. Does this make sense?
Yes.
This is why the kind of stuff that I'm teaching you and being disciplined, even in this first class of anatomy, is something you want to get used to for the rest of your life. There is no time can you cruise for the rest of your life in healthcare. Why? If you cruise, you're gonna still be shucking out tonsils. When the data is clear, you shouldn't. And then you get your ass sued, and your whole career is not enjoyable. This career is only enjoyable if you stay up on it, and that requires discipline. The term practicing nursing, nurse practitioner, practicing medicine, practicing dentistry. The term practicing means the discipline to stay up on things, of always getting better. You never shoot for a C. That whole mentality that this valley gives kids to shoot for a C bars you from excelling in health careers. Question?
So why do you get tonsil stones?
What's that?
Tonsil stones, you know, back in the health team?
Okay, there's a lot of things of the juices back there. And if there's a chronic condition, some of those things can concentrate and precipitate, and it can almost form like the way an oyster makes a pearl.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just let you, just chew on that one, not on the tonsil stone, just chew on that one. Okay, can we move on?
Yes.
All right, function slide. Function of the lymphatic system. Production of lymphocytes. B, T, NK stands for natural killers. They're the gangsters, the gangster ones. You gotta fight off infections as well as cancers. T cells not only fight off cancers, they also take out tissue transplants because they're foreign. We'll have 2 slides on the specific immune response. And there's 2 different versions. It's like 2 wings of a bird, cell-mediated and antibody-mediated wings. Okay, you guys know what this picture of is on the right? Brown is tumor. White are cytotoxic T cells. taking opportunity. Second function, remove foreign particles, things that don't belong. If you trip and skin your knee, it's not just bacteria getting in your body, it's also dirt and other inert things that are not biologically, don't belong. And cells have to eat them. And those are usually the macrophages. Neutrophils come first, but they get full. Then the big eaters come, the monocytes, they squeeze out of the blood vessels, now we call them macrophages, right? Look at that term that's highlighted on the slide, dendritic cell. Everybody see that? That is a specific kind of macrophage that can send out really long cell processes, arms out, to snag bacteria and things that don't belong. And when it's doing this in a bunch of different directions, that macrophage almost looks like a cell body with dendrites. So they call it a dendritic cell. Don't get that confused, it's not a nerve cell. It just looks like it. So look at this arm right here, boom. If you had a bunch of arms going way out, it's a dendritic cell. Everybody got it? It's just a specific kind of macrophage. Let's watch this, this animation though, and just kind of wrap your mind around it. Say you skin your knee and you get some bacteria in your body. You have an antibody which looks like a capital Y that's gonna snag it. Then you're gonna get receptor-mediated endophagocytosis. Now remember when I said, when we were looking at endocytosis and exocytosis in lecture exam 1, I said this is an active transport process. It requires ATP, but the animations don't show ATP being burned, correct? Look at this. That's actin and myosin, sliding filaments. The same that's in skeletal muscle. And remember how much ATP is burned by skeletal muscle? Sliding filaments, the myosin heads, are burning ATP. Remember that from lecture exam 2? Now look at, now you can understand how endocytosis is an active process. You couldn't understand that in lecture exam 1, huh? But now you can. See, you guys are getting there.
Are they actually sliding it to the,
Uh-huh. That's what's drawing this huge vesicle inside that's carrying this bacteria. Watch it again. Then the lysosomes have strong digestive enzymes. That's in the cytoplasm. Well, watch it. Endocytosis. Sliding filaments, bringing that baby in. Now it's called a phagosome. Now you have also myosin fusing the lysosome to it. The digestive enzymes come out and digest the bacteria into amino acids, glucose, fatty acids. This macrophage will actually be able to make ATP from the nutrients of the bacteria. You did not feed this macrophage, you just skinned your knee. And you actually fed this macrophage. Kind of like Halloween. Third, that's this. You gotta return all that interstitial fluid back to the bloodstream. Because every day, almost 3/4 of your blood volume leaks out of capillaries. This is a big issue. That's what this is saying. This process is almost 3/4 of your total blood volume every day. So this function number 3 is quite important. 4, this has to do with the lacteals. So here's the sequence specifically for lacteals. It's gonna go into lacteals, then collecting vessels, they're called deep lymphatics, is gonna get filtered by mesenteric lymph nodes. Then it's gonna go into the intestinal trunk, which is named. Then it's gonna go into this large collecting space called the cisterna chyli. Then that's where, coming out of the cisterna chyli is the beginning of the thoracic duct. Starts at the cisterna chyli, ends up in the left subclavian vein. So when I said everything that you eat and drink is gonna get filtered by the liver through the hepatic portal vein, you guys remember that? From the stomach to the rectum, and that's an oversimplified falsehood. Not everything, almost everything. Fats, you never see the liver, it ends up here. Got it? Most of the things that you'll hear this semester and in physiology have been oversimplified to the point of being actually a lie. But you gotta start somewhere. Then once you have the basics, then you find out how complicated things are. Okay? First get the basics though, even though you know it's a lie. Don't worry. Tease tests will test you to see if you know some lies.
So that cisterna is like a connection to the trunk and the thoracic duct. Is there multiple different ones like that?
There's just one. So it's this huge sac here, where all those intestinal vessels, intestinal trunks drain into this guy, and right here at the top of it is where the thoracic duct starts.
Okay. So that's just on the thoracic duct side? Is there
Yes,
also-
there's only one cisterna chyli, and at the very top of it is the beginning of the thoracic duct.
Okay.
Only one. Okay, any questions? Oh, by the way, this was not in lab. I don't have a good picture in lab, but this is actually showing you in this picture. I told you how the hemiazygous vein collecting blood from the left intercostal veins and the azygous vein collecting blood from the right intercostal veins. They're not symmetrical, that's why we don't use right or left. Here is the hemiazygous vein. Here's the azygous vein. They're gonna empty into the superior vena cava, but they are not symmetrical. Okay? Has to do with these connections between the two. All right, let's talk about immunology. When I was at UCLA, I had to take 2 quarters of immunology. Physiology, you get 2 lectures of immunology. You guys get 2 slides. So I am condensing a lot in 2 slides. The best way to understand the immune system, to start to understand the immune system, is to think of the immune system as 2 wings of a bird fighting viruses. And the reason why it's important to do that is because if your immune system can take out viruses, bacteria, fungi, and other things are a piece of cake. Everybody got it? Remember that viruses are not living. They're inert. They only show biological activity inside of real cells. And what they do is they turn real cells into virus-making machines, the virus-making factories. Do you guys remember telling you that?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the cell-mediated immunity. First, a macrophage is going to eat a virus, tear it apart, and put little pieces of the virus on top of their self-markers. The self-marker is called the major histocompatibility complex MHC marker. That's what this means right here. So the antigen is parts of the virus. It's going to put it on top of the self-markers. That's going to trigger a whole bunch of cloning of cells, but here we're gonna be talking about T cells. Eventually getting effector cytotoxic T cells that actually don't target the virus. They target your cells that have become virus-making factories. And they actually have to bind to certain receptors, release a very small dose of toxin directly on that one cell, which is why they call this touch killing. They actually have to bind to the receptor, they have to touch it. And once they do, they release the toxin and it destroys the cell. It destroys the virus-making factory. And then there'll be some prime T cells or memory T cells in case you get infected by the same virus again. The cytotoxic T cells are the cells that take out cancer cells, as well as tissue transplants, because even without a virus, tissue transplants from somebody else is gonna have different MHC complexes, and it's gonna recognize those as foreign, which is why anybody who does get a heart transplant or any kind of transplant has to undergo immunosuppressive therapy. You've got to hold down this wing, or this wing's gonna take out that heart. Everybody got it? Any questions on this wing? Cell-mediated immunity.
So you're putting, was following, and then the part where you're saying he has to actually touch it and put a part of the virus on it? So is the virus actually what's killing the
The
virus?
virus is inside here,
What's
and this guy's gonna about ready to make thousands of viruses, but before it can release it, boom, it's gone.
What is it actually touching it with?
It's actually touching it with CD8 receptors.
Okay, so it's a receptor that kills it.
It's a surface protein. And so does all your infected cells. And it's going to bind on receptors and kill.
I got it.
Okay, any questions? Okay, this is a lot of immunology condensed into 2 slides. Antibody-mediated immunity, also referred to as humoral immunity. Same thing starts it, macrophages. This is about B cells, but look we also have helper T cells. Helper T cells stimulates cloning of both wings. It'll get you cytotoxic T cells, and it'll get you plasma cells, also referred to as effector B cells. The plasma cells get really big, and they have a bunch of rough endoplasmic reticulum, so they can make these proteins called immunoglobulins, or antibodies. They release the antibodies, so they can stay in the lymph node. Cytotoxic T cells have to go out and migrate and find infected cells. Plasma cells stay in the lymph node and just secrete out a bunch of antibodies, put it in the lymph, it eventually goes in here, subclavian veins. Now you got antibodies floating around attacking free floating viruses. This way both wings can take out both the free floating viruses with this wing and the viral making factories in the previous wing.
Is that the purple?
What's that?
Is that the purple? B cell? Or no?
The purple is actually, in this case they're using it fighting a bacteria in the animations. That's a bacteria. We're gonna consider it about fighting a virus. Because for fighting bacteria, you only need antibodies. Then when the antibodies bind to the bacteria, opsonize means it's putting a big red flag on the bacteria, and the big red flag is saying, eat me. And the phagocytes go after it. It's putting a big flag on it, promoting phagocytosis. And again, you will have memory B cells sticking around for that virus, whether it's hepatitis B or that, the flu virus, if somebody sneezes it on you again. Or, everybody look at me. Or if it's made to make anti-D if you are an Rh negative woman carrying Rh positive babies. These are the cells you are trying to prevent the Rh negative woman from making for the D antigen. If she never has those, she can continue to have babies. And every pregnancy is immunologically like the first, and the first baby didn't have problems. You guys remember me talking about that? Okay. Any questions?
So the first wing and the second wing is not necessarily about importance, it's just different ways of doing it?
Yeah, well, it's like, that's why I say, think of it as two wings of a bird.
Right.
They're both equal.
But the first bird wing, it says that it goes after the like cancer cells or like tissue transplants. Does the second wing not do that? Because
No.
it's in the lymph nodes?
Yes, so,
Okay.
second, the antibody wing doesn't do that. Hey, everybody look, there's a lot of things here that are really relevant. Look at this slide and look at the previous slide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which are the only two cells, your cells, that are on both slides? What's that? Be specific.
Helper T.
Helper T cells and what? Macrophages. HIV, those are the only two cells that have CD4 receptors. HIV has this surface protein called GP120 that has great affinity for CD4 receptors. HIV targets macrophages and helper T cells. Macrophages starts the immune response, helper T stimulates both wings. When someone has HIV, no one dies of HIV. They die from a decimated immune system with both wings crippled. You get opportunistic infections and strange cancers that you only find when someone has HIV. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Do you see the kind of relevance we're talking about here? Aren't you guys excited to learn more about this?
Yeah.
Well, that's it for this class. I'm not giving you any more immunology in this class. All right, so Thursday is lecture exam 3. Again, keep your phones off or silent, watches off, put it in your backpacks, purses off to the wall. Empty seat next to you and the next person. Drop off your Virgin Blue book on the front desk.